All right, all right, all right. How are you? I'm doing just splendid. Thank you so much for asking. Welcome to another episode of the Working Ant. It is just absolutely wonderful to be with you. Hope you've been having yourself a wonderful week. Gearing up for Thanksgiving. I definitely know I am. Yours truly. It's definitely a holiday individual. I typically love just hanging out in the holidays, just seeing family, spending time with my baby boy. Just really, using it like many of you to self-reflect, recalibrate, and reassess, how to conduct myself in a more aligned fashion as I move forward with my own career. And I would expect no less from you. Today's topic of conversation is actually one of my favorite topics of conversation. It's a contentious issue because, many people sort of believe that, either intelligence wins over imagination or imagination wins over intelligence. And it has to be, in some way, one or the other. There are no two winners here overall. But yours truly is definitely one to believe that imagination will always win over intelligence in the long run. In the long run, I want to make that clear, like in the long run. And so we're going to talk about that today. And I want to sort of relate it to your career path and like actually where you've been up into this moment, where you're thinking about going in the future, sort of like how you've gotten to this point where most likely, if you're like most people, your imagination and your creativity has been tamed, if not neutered, altogether. And I use that analogy deliberately because today, as I walk, down the streets, I don't really see too much lift in people's feet, and that bothers me. I mentioned that last week, and it primarily bothers me because there's so much to look forward to. So many opportunities, and yet so many things in this macroeconomic climate, from reading the news, the power of bad, all that stuff is real. And it just makes one feel that, hey, you know what? I've got to be in like survival mode. I've got to sort of bring myself together, tighten up my pocket, my wallet, and just make sure that, I'm only, spending what I need to be spending, being wiser about some decisions that I'm about to be making. And, if, you've got some responsibilities, some major responsibilities, I presume you actually do, you want to keep things at minimum, sustaining the life that you have created for yourself, for your family, for your loved ones, for your partner, for your dog, for your cat, et cetera, et cetera. You know where I'm going with this. And really what I want to touch on is this idea of, imagination and why it bothers me so much that so many of us actually have our imagination tamed when it's actually our imagination that got us here to begin with. I mentor a lot of young people, either fresh out of college or those that didn't have a college education that are getting themselves ready to jumpstart their career. I'm not just coaching leaders and executives because I actually learn just as much from individuals that have dealt with scarcity in their lives, similar to my own experience. And, I sort of keep in touch with those dreams and imagination and trying to, go through the hustle and bustle, making a dollar holler, all that stuff very early on in their career. In addition to, what my primary, obviously, coaching, which is on the leadership side of things. But what I've noticed, and this shouldn't be a surprise to you, because I'm sure you've actually come from very much of an imaginative state at some point early on in your career. You either dreamt of a home, you dreamt of a nice car to drive, you dreamt of living a life of an abundance. If you're the Biggie Small sort of type, birthdays were the worst days, but now you sip champagne when your Thursday sort of dream. Or if you're one of my favorite Nigerian rappers, Nikki Tall, who says, wasn't born with a silver spoon, and quitting is not an option, but one day he's going to pop champagne, celebrating in front of his mansion. And I absolutely love Nikki Tall. Most of you will know Biggie Smalls, but you probably wouldn't know Nicky Tall. Anyways, that's a side note there, but that's really sort of like the imaginative sort of feeling of young people, and it's actually, once upon a time, we were much younger, and we had dreams of our own. And, many of times, obviously dreams turn out to be different than what we intended them to be. Dreams come from the heart, of course. I think that's somewhere buried somewhere in the Walt Disney World. But it's something quite beautiful to actually have dreams, to have these like aspirations, and whether or not your dreams and aspirations turned out to be exactly, where you're at right now. I mean, one thing's for certain is you probably are in a better place because you had them to begin with. And yet, what I find at the leadership level these days is, there's this constant focus on hedging and a constant focus on data. And that's great. We should always make decisions, based on the data that's available to us. There's a narrative around that data. There's facts around data. There's things that obviously play out as we sort of gather enough information in order to make some level of an informed decision, in some way to ensure that, hey, you know what? We're not falling off a cliff here. There's some sort of reasoning behind our rationale for decision making, and yours truly, you want to call me a pessimist here, so be it. I am, quite upset, like I think everybody, regarding these layoffs. I think most of you, if you're hearing it this week, probably have learned of like Amazon laying off another 10,000+ people from their workforce. And I can't really help, to think about whether or not this really had to do very much with economic forecasting of where we were heading. Certainly there were many indicators that, things would certainly slow down. And I'm not going to get into like what those are. You have your financial advisors there that probably could say, hey, there's a lot of signs pointing to some level like of a downturn. If you're here in the Bay Area, you're probably witnessing it. And, hyperinflation, you're witnessing it in real estate prices at the gas pump, certainly. But there are many like economic indicators that, we shouldn't be hiring this many people. And, I'm sure those that were hired and then were let go would have definitely preferred to have been hired to begin with. And there's an argument there. But, this shouldn't just come as a surprise to many of you. If you've sort of been following some level of economic indication of where we're actually headed as an industry, as an economic industry, as a country, as a global economy. And so what bothers me here is primarily, the fact that, we overhired, and here we are, we're in a situation where we're really just trying to make things work for ourselves. It's like, what? If you ask people a few months back, hey, how are you feeling? They would say like, hey, I'm feeling great. I want to go out, take a vacation, go do something with my family, buy something that I'm looking forward to buy. I'm waiting for Black Friday. I'm waiting for the holidays. I'm waiting for, some deal that I actually can get for myself. And that is absolutely wonderful. But if I ask people today, like, hey, how are you? They'll say, I'm very, very lucky to have a job at this point in time. And, I'm hoping it actually stays that way. And so, what, there's a period of relativity, and everything does, happen for a reason. But I want to focus in on this idea of imagination versus intelligence. And, the fact that we are so data driven actually prevents us from hedging personally on ourselves. The fact that, as we've grown in our careers, we've realized that, hey, data does play a role. And I'm sure like, for those of you that are in leadership positions or like, in staff and senior staff positions, influencing without authority, perhaps at any level, you're probably, looking at, more data-driven decisions, especially in an economic climate like this. And why wouldn't you? But I think here, like what's really important to point out is, this idea of like imagination becomes preventative at a personal level when we certainly suppress it at a professional level. And it's very, very important to recognize that, because, no matter where it is you are right now, no matter how far you are in your career, if we don't have a level of imagination, well, where are we going to get a level of inspiration? Where are we going to get a level of motivation, a driving force to actually push ourselves to either do more, learn more, grow more, be compensated more, align ourselves more, whatever it actually is. There's this feeling of, more, not because we should, not because we could, but most likely because we must. And there's this yearning, right? This beating, inside of your head, heart, and I want to do more for myself. But the intelligence aspect of it actually hinders us. And it's almost as far as me saying, I actually remember my father saying this to me one day, and I was like, no way. But the more and more I sort of experienced it, the more I realized he was actually right in that, the more intelligence someone actually has, the harder it is it's going to be for that person to typically make a decision. And a decision here in this particular case that actually has some level of compounded risk that one must have the palate to actually take without fear of loss. And that's a critical sort of analysis over why it is we certainly have the paralysis in the analysis. It's because we can become so, intelligent, have so many tools at our disposal, have so many resources available to us that we can exhaust ourselves trying to find a level of intelligence to justify something when really the only justification that's necessary is that, you dreamed it, you want it, you can see it, you can visualize it, and therefore, why not? If not you, then who? If not now, then when? And, I say that time and again, but because, if we don't have a level of imagination, especially during a time like this, we're not going to be able to innovate, not only by the way, the obvious here, which is I'm talking about personally for yourself, but even professionally, at work, and I see it and I'd like you to open up your eyes and see it. More and more of us hedge during times like these because we want to actually survive the storm. When in fact, I want to encourage you to consider an alternative in that, there are several opportunities available to those in situations like this, where most people are afraid to take one step forward without, having their head turned back and looking around and seeing what on earth could I have been not doing in order to have preserved, what I am prepared perhaps to actually lose. And that's really not the state that I want you to be in. That's not the state I certainly would encourage anyone to be in. And this is not to say that we should ignore reality one bit. This is just to recognize that your imagination is an actual pillar. It's an actual foundational pillar of how you achieved what you've achieved today. And actually, and I'm going to say this loud and clear here, if you don't have a strong imagination to anchor off of going into the future, well, might as well go into it blind, or go into it, with a laissez-faire sort of mentality, a nonchalant sort of mentality, an arrogant sort of mentality. It's you know what, let's wait for the wind to come and see what actually changes. And maybe we find fortune along the way. And maybe you do. It was a lottery last week. I think it was close to $2 billion. Maybe you're one of those people that believe in an amount of luck coming your way, and good on you. It's beautiful to believe in an amount of luck. I'm one to say hey, you know what? With that great sort of level of preparation, probably heard this before, and a little bit of luck, a great opportunity. Our preparedness is there to maximize that opportunity. But I'm saying here, the opportunity that you need already exists within you, and that is a huge part dependent and contingent on your ability to imagine more for yourself. This level of imagination, it's almost like going back to this idea of overhiring. People had a stronger imagination of what they may lose out on or what this workforce may look like, more so than the actual data. And if you wanted proof in the pudding of that, of whether or not imagination wins over intelligence, well, there it is. And you may say, hey, Rami, we didn't anticipate a war in the Ukraine. And I understand that completely, but I also will say, it was an inevitability that we would get to a slowdown like this. It was only prolonging the inevitable that we found ourselves in, where it's we're having these cuts at such a massive scale here. And if you're one of those people, I encourage you to listen, to my podcast for the last few weeks. I think I've been talking about, how to prepare yourself in a situation like this. Don't be a career sitting duck is one of them. I encourage you to listen to that. But, here, going back to our topic of conversation today, I implore you to consider how it is you can reignite re-evoke this level of imagination that's actually going to get you to where it is you have intended to be. May not necessarily land exactly there, but actually have some level of driving force. It's almost like, a level of imagination, even for yourself, thinking, something that I do for myself. I can walk across my home office and I can see, on a big giant whiteboard, yeah, I love you, Rami. You're enough. You've got everything that you need in order to succeed. And that in itself is a level of imagination for myself. I'm sure it would be imagination for yours as well. And that, hey, you know what? We have everything we need to get to the level that, we believe we could attain. And, this idea of not having an imagination as we grow older in our careers, as we mature in our careers, becomes a hindrance. And in fact, I'll go as far as saying it becomes a liability. Your inability to imagine, your inability to, whether it's getting back into this like childhood, like curious, like spirit that is many of cases required in order to have an imagination, we're looking at a very, very flat level of growth for ourselves. And you know what? In this macroeconomic climate, I don't expect you to take this gigantic risk on yourself. But what I do expect is you to just have some idea book, a journal, something you can write on, something that reminds you of a very positive, beautiful future for yourself. And who wouldn't want that for yourself? And so again here, remember that, a particular state, a particular emotional state is going to be required for you to evoke this imagination. I'm one on like getting out of your physical state, going somewhere, that's inspiring for you, someplace where you can think with very little distraction. I had a client last week, go for a massage, if even an hour or 90-minute massage or someplace at the spa or swimming somewhere where you're away from all of these electronics, this massive abundance of information, all of this distraction all around you, someplace where you can actually think, get in touch with yourself and just imagine like, hey, where would I actually want to be, in a few years? And if you can't imagine an actual event or an outcome, at minimum, think through what sort of an emotion do you want to actually feel, a year on out, 2 years on out, more stable, more secure, more feeling like I'm a reliable, dependable person in what it is that I do, an expert at my craft, a master at what it is that I do. And so, it could be an emotion itself that actually leads you to progress in some of these outcomes, you're looking for yourself. But please make no mistake about it. The more you're learning in your arsenal, while most people will say like, hey, this is an amazing thing. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to take a class. I'm going to do something for myself. I encourage all of that. But there comes a point where you've got to read your own sort of like story here. You got to create your own. You got to be the narrator of your own. And that requires a level of imagination for yourself. And sure, you can be inspired by wonderful people around you, people that lift you up, people in your proximity that uplift you, that, you feel like, hey, I can learn from, I can anchor off of these people. That's absolutely wonderful. But at the end of the day, and if you're washing your teeth at the end of the day or early in the morning, at minimum here, hope you're washing your teeth at least twice a day. You got yourself to look at, it's just you and yourself. And if you're not being able to dream, at least where it stays somewhat partly in the recesses of your mind before it becomes to the forefront of your mind through your imagination, well, there's a world of beauty out there, a world of opportunity that for some reason we just may drift through life missing out on. And if you've imagined before and you failed in your quest for more for yourself, if you've had, belief systems that have been dispelled for whatever reason, put down, suppressed for whatever reason that is, well, just remember how much you've learned to get to this place, to get to this exact moment, to get to this precise second you listening to me or watching me on my YouTube channel. By the way, I'm at Coach Rami on YouTube if you feel like ever watching me one day. But, obviously that's your choice. Listening to me at this point in time, not to take away from any of that. You've got to this point because you have acquired so much, getting here to begin with, whether these are, this is like information, this is a new skill set, this is an experience, this is something that, you've been able to ride out, multiple barriers along the way. You've gotten here, because you deserve to be here, because you were meant to be here. I'm one to believe that. And I also am one to believe that somewhere along the way, you are imagining wonderful things for yourself. If you're listening to this right now and you've got, a working, functioning brain, and hopefully somewhat of a healthy body here, there is nothing more that you need outside of just imagining something more for yourself, because, well, I feel like you deserve it. And why wouldn't you? And why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you get to this point where you can then actually contribute back, similar to others that have done so before you, before me, before us? And what a wonderful thing that would actually be. So please, please, please tap into, your inner child, your curiosity. Put your ego to the side here. Go out, talk to someone, learn something from someone. Remember, it could be the person next to you on the subway. It could be the person behind you in an auditorium. It could be someone you can connect with on LinkedIn randomly. It could be someone you can actually teach in order to receive for yourself. But please foster this level of imagination. As you get closer to these holidays and the new year, imagine an opportunity for yourself that you've never, ever, ever dreamed of finally coming to fruition in some way. And then begin to prepare yourself accordingly. Remember, inevitably, I am one to believe this, inevitably you are going to get a call. You are going to get a ping. You are going to get a request. You are going to get called into an office, a meeting, whatever it is, in front of one of the greatest opportunities of your life. And I want you to be prepared to actually seize it. It may not look like the greatest opportunity of your life, but over time, it certainly could be, with the right tools and skills that have got you to this point. At minimum, that. So imagine it, see it, crystallize it, go out, pursue it. And again, if not you, well then who on earth, who else? Who else would it be? So, and that's why I will always believe, and I'll always stand by the fact that imagination will always win over intelligence. Thank you so much for investing your time with me. This is your host and coach, Rami Balut, and I will see you all next week. Bye for now. And happy Thanksgiving if we actually don't speak sooner. And God bless. Bye for now.